Hello and welcome to the tutorial where I will attempt to show you how to make a WebSocket server from complete scratch using no external dependencies whatsoever in nodeJS. Let's take a look at the demo first of all. So here I'm connected to a simple nodeJS server, which hopefully we'll take a look at in a second. And there's two different clients which could represent two different computers. So we'll take a look at the details in a second. So imagine someone connects and then they start their connection. And the other person also connects. And if one person wants to send a message to the other person, then they can do so. And you can see the message that they send here connects the other person. So let's take a quick glance at this sample code before we get into our own coding, and then we'll discuss what WebSockets are in a simple way and how to implement them. So basically, a WebSocket is server is essentially for browsers. It's essentially built off a regular HTTP server, except it has some extra headers. So in fact, let's take a look at some of the header information that's sent when we start a new WebSocket connection. So for example, if you want to start a new WebSocket connection to anyone, in JavaScript, for example, let's make a new variable and then something, and then we make it equal to a new WebSocket, capital W, capital S. And then in the parentheses, we do the URL of our server, which in this case is localhost. But it's prefaced by, instead of HTTP, we do WS colon slash slash. This is a unique protocol called WS, WebSocket protocol. And for this server, it's localhost. And hopefully, I'll try to put an example for this server in the description or something. And at the port, and then let's make an event for when it opens. So for example, something dot on open equals new function, and we'll just console.log opened. Ooh, okay, opened. So that means that this opened. So it doesn't look like much, but let's take a look at the network tab just to take a look at the actual headers that are going on for the details of this connection. So, for example, when we this second one is right here is what just happened when we connected to the WebSocket. So let's take a look at some of these headers. So as you can see, it connects with a GET request to our server, and it sends this status code 101 WebSocket. And the request is these are all like normal standard things, but then it sends this section dash WebSocket extensions, which is one thing. And the main thing that we need to keep in mind when making a server is this part that says sec dash WebSocket dash key, which this is a unique identifier that is made by the client, which sends to the server, which we need to interpret and send back a response. And the version is not so important. And then also the main part, besides for this key, is when it says upgrade WebSocket and connection upgrade right here. So essentially, there's three things that we need to keep in mind on the server side. Three kinds of headers we need to look for. First of all, connection upgrade. Second, upgrade WebSocket, and third, the sec-WebSocket-key. And when that happens, then the server knows to give a certain response. So you can see that the response has the header, which this is generated by the server, and you could add other headers, but this is just done from scratch, so it only has a few defaults. So it has three headers. So first of all, the server needs to send back connection upgrade, just like the client sent connection upgrade, because essentially when you make a WebSocket, you upgrade, which I'll explain in a second. And then it needs to send back sec-WebSocket-accept with another key which is generated on the server in a complicated way, which is hopefully not too complicated, but hopefully we'll talk about it. And then it needs to send back upgrade WebSocket. So very briefly, WebSockets are a way for communicating data from the client to the server and from the server to the client in real time. Meaning, generally when you visit a website, that client, the browser, makes a request to the server, meaning it asks for information, and then the server gives back the information. But then after the server gives back the information for a regular website using HTTP, then that connection between the client and the server is instantly closed, and the only thing you have is the information the server gave you. But essentially, WebSockets are the idea of upgrading, connection upgrade, meaning it allows, even after the client makes a request to the server and the server gives a basic response, when it says connection upgrade, essentially it's like upgrading to a new level, meaning we don't close the connection right away. We keep the connection between the client and the server open to allow both sides to send and receive data, which is useful for real-time chat messaging, games, etc. Anything where you need to receive information from your browser from the server directly. And the alternative to doing this, which was before WebSockets, is people usually using HTTP, only the client can talk to the server. So usually what had to be done is the client would have to constantly keep asking the server if there was an update for something, which takes up a lot of bandwidth and other things. So WebSockets are meant to make that process simpler for sending information from the server directly to the client, meaning you don't have to keep on asking the server for new information. The server automatically sends a message directly to the client as the connection is open, which allows real-time communication, real-time chat, and also real-time web video calls, which could be done through WebRTC and other things. So I'm trying to split up these videos into smaller sections so I don't lose any information, but let's at least try starting to get the basic server running, and then hopefully we'll talk about some of these headers soon. Essentially, we need to look for the headers that say upgrade WebSocket and sec WebSocket key and connection upgrade. And we need to give back the headers connection upgrade sec-websocket-accept with this key, which is the most complicated part of the headers, in my humble opinion, which we'll talk about how to generate this. And then the third header, upgrade WebSocket. That's how to open the connection. And then sending the messages is the next step. And receiving messages from the client to the server is actually more complicated than sending message from the server to the client. So we'll maybe talk about that later. But the steps are essentially opening the initial connection, which is called the handshake in technical terms, and that's what we just saw here. Which is opening the connection. And then after we open the connection, then we have to send messages, which is simpler than receiving them. And then we receive the messages. So let's just get started with a new nodeJS file. So this is the example code. If you want to look at it and memorize it all, then you could do that. And hopefully I'll try to post this somewhere online, although it doesn't fully work yet regarding receiving messages, because the sending messages is a lot simpler than receiving them. So some of this is helper functions, but we'll talk about it anyway. So the first thing to do, let's start a new Node.js file. And you could call it anything. I just called it that. So let's see. WebSockets from scratch, actual, and make a new server. You can put it anywhere you want, but whatever. And essentially, what we do is we use a standard HTTP library to start out WebSockets. So, for example, HTTP equals require HTTP. Simple enough. And now let's make our server object. So var server equals http.create_server, which this is done when you make a regular server. And essentially, WebSockets are the idea of combining regular HTTP servers with the special WebSocket servers. You could actually have a regular website that also functions as a WebSocket server. So in here we have our function, our callback function for doing a server. So in here we have our request information and then our response, which we do. So for example, if you want to make a basic website, just to say something in HTTP, we say response.end Baruch Hashem. Okay, this is all standard Node.js server. Now, the thing is, when we do listen, we listen on a certain port, let's say 8081, for example, and then this is our callback function for after we start listening. Now, in here is the key part for how we start WebSockets. In here, we do server.on upgrade, which means this is when we, as I said earlier, we're looking for the header that says upgrade here. So server.on upgrade tells us that when we have that header automatically, and then it gives us in response a sockets, which, as you can think of sockets like two connections, like one connection to the other. So it's like the idea of the client connecting to the server and keeping the connection open. So whenever you have an HTTP server, it has these things called sockets, which in Node.js is part of the class, the net class, which is what the HTTP module is built off of. So in here, this is where all the things happen. So essentially, I'm gonna end the video here, and then hopefully in the next video we'll talk about actually how to interpret the headers, etc. Because